My name is Mila Ashcroft, and from the outside, my family looked untouchable. We lived in a gated neighborhood where the lawns were always trimmed, the cars were always new, and neighbors smiled a little too proudly when they said our last name. My parents were known as self-made, admired for turning a small hospitality venture into a regional luxury brand. People whispered our name like it meant something permanent, powerful. But inside that house, I learned very early that love was not divided equally. My younger sister, Alara, was everything my parents adored. Effortless, charming, always chosen. If Alara wanted something, it appeared. Private academies, international trips, a brand new car before she even graduated. My parents called it investing in potential. When I needed something, I was told to figure it out. I figured out a lot. I worked after school while Alara attended galas. I paid my own way through college while my parents bragged about Alara's future. I graduated with honors in business analytics, landed a solid job, and climbed quietly. Never loudly enough for them to notice. I thought for a long time that if I worked hard enough, they'd eventually see me. They never did. The only person who truly did was my grandfather, Arthur Ashcroft. Arthur was the real architect behind everything our family owned. Long before hotels carried our name, before my parents wore tailored suits and practiced interviews in mirrors, Arthur had been making smart, patient investments. Real estate. Quiet partnerships. Long-term planning. He believed wealth should be built slowly and shared fairly. When I was little, he used to let me sit in his study while he worked. I didn't understand balance sheets then, but I understood this. He listened when I spoke. He asked me questions. He remembered my answers. "You see the details others miss," he once told me. "That matters." As I got older, he became my anchor. When my parents dismissed my achievements, Arthur celebrated them. When I doubted myself, he reminded me who I was. Before I turned 25, he told me something in confidence, something he never shared openly. He had set aside a family trust, meant to secure the future of both his granddaughters. Equal shares. No favoritism. No manipulation. It wasn't just money. It included oversight stakes in the family business once certain conditions were met. "Fairness keeps families honest," he said. At the time I believed him. I believed fairness existed in our family because he did. By my early 30s, I had built a career far from my parents' shadow. I worked as a senior financial strategist for a mid-sized firm, respected but invisible to my family. They liked telling people Alara would run things someday. They never mentioned me at all. Still, I showed up when invited. Holidays. Birthdays. Anniversaries. Hope is stubborn like that. The week everything changed, I was preparing for the biggest presentation of my career. A national firm had shown interest in bringing me on as a partner, something I'd worked toward for nearly a decade. I had flights booked, meetings scheduled, my future finally within reach. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was unsteady, strained in a way I'd never heard before. "Mila," she said softly, "it's your grandfather." My stomach dropped instantly. She told me he'd collapsed, that there had been a fall, that doctors weren't sure how serious it was, but it didn't look good. She said they needed family close. Arthur wasn't just my grandfather. He was my safe place. The one person who never made me feel like an afterthought. I didn't hesitate. I canceled my flight, postponed the presentation, sent emails full of apologies I shouldn't have had to write. Within hours, I was driving back toward the city I'd worked so hard to leave behind, my chest tight with fear. I replayed her words the entire drive. "Bad fall. Not sure how serious. Please come." When I arrived at Arthur's house, I barely noticed the quiet street or the familiar stone steps. I rushed inside, bracing myself for hospital beds and whispered voices. Instead, I stopped cold. Arthur was sitting in his favorite armchair, sunlight spilling across the room. He was holding a mug of coffee, reading the paper, looking completely fine. No bandages. No monitors. No sign of collapse. He looked up, startled. "Mila? What are you doing here?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. My heart was still racing from fear, from the drive, from everything I'd dropped to be there. "Mom called," I finally said. "She said you were hurt." His expression changed, not confusion, but something heavier. Something darker. She told you that? He asked quietly. The room felt smaller. He set the paper down and rubbed his temples, like someone who had just realized a line had been crossed that couldn't be undone. She asked me to lie, he said. Said it would be easier if you stayed behind. My legs felt weak as I sat down. Stayed behind? From what? That's when my phone buzzed. A notification. Then another. I opened social media without thinking. And there it was. A photo posted less than an hour ago. My parents. Ilara. Smiling. Barefoot. White sand. Clear blue water. The caption read, "Nothing like family time in paradise." Everyone was there. Everyone, except me. And in that moment, sitting in my grandfather's quiet living room, I realized this wasn't an accident. This was a decision. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. My parents stood arm in arm, relaxed in a way I'd never seen around me. Ilara was in the center, laughing, sun-kissed, completely at home in a life I had been deliberately excluded from. Behind them, the ocean stretched endlessly. Calm, beautiful, cruel. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had planned this. They told me it was a family retreat, I whispered, more to myself than to Arthur. Mom said everyone was going. Arthur's jaw tightened. They never intended to take you, Mila. Something inside my chest cracked. Not loudly but deeply. The kind of break you don't feel right away, because it's been forming for years. I scrolled further. More photos. More smiles. More comments from friends and extended relatives praising what a beautiful family we were. Someone even wrote, "So glad everyone could make it." Everyone. I felt foolish. Naive. Like a child who keeps setting a place at the table for people who stopped coming long ago. They used you, I said slowly, lifting my eyes to Arthur. They used your name to keep me away. He nodded once. And that's why I refused to lie for them. That was when the anger hit. Not sharp and explosive, but cold and steady. A clarity I hadn't felt before. All those years I told myself I wasn't favored because Ilara needed more help. That my parents leaned on her because she was fragile. That my independence was a compliment, not neglect. I had been lying to myself. That night, sleep never came. I sat on the couch in Arthur's living room, the house quiet except for the ticking clock and the soft hum of the refrigerator. My phone glowed in the dark as I scrolled through more posts from the trip. Group dinners, champagne glasses raised, yacht selfies. Each image felt intentional, like proof they wanted seen. Around midnight, Arthur joined me. He didn't say anything at first. Just sat beside me, his presence steady. There's something you need to know, he finally said. My stomach tightened. What kind of something? He stood and walked toward his study, motioning for me to follow. I hesitated for only a second before getting up. Arthur opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a thick folder. Worn edges. Labeled tabs. Documents carefully organized. This, he said, handing it to me, is what I've been tracking for years. I took it slowly, like it might burn me. Inside were bank statements, trust summaries, legal correspondence, transfers highlighted in yellow. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then I did. My name appeared on account headers, accounts I had never accessed. Funds moved in increments that didn't trigger alerts. Tuition payments, vehicle purchases, investments made in Ilara's name. All paid for with money that was never meant to be hers alone. They were supposed to divide the trust equally, Arthur said quietly. That was the agreement. My hands trembled as I turned page after page. Luxury condos. Failed ventures quietly absorbed. Loans that were never repaid. They hadn't taken everything at once. They'd taken it slowly, carefully, like thieves who lived inside the house and knew exactly where the floorboards creaked. How long? I asked. Arthur's silence answered before his words did. Years. My chest felt tight, like there wasn't enough air in the room. All the nights I stayed late at work. All the sacrifices I'd made thinking I was building something on my own, while they were quietly handing my future to my sister. There's more, Arthur said. I looked up, dread pooling in my stomach. They're restructuring the company. Finalizing control. Everything is being positioned to pass to Ilara alone. The family business. The one I dreamed, foolishly, of being part of someday. Completely. I asked. They're cutting me out entirely? Arthur nodded. I gave your father temporary control years ago, trusting he'd honor the conditions. That trust was misplaced. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I felt grief, not just for the money or the business, but for the idea of family I'd clung to far longer than I should have. They never wanted me, I said finally. Did they? Arthur placed his hand over mine. They wanted obedience. You didn't give them that. Something hardened inside me then. Not hatred. Resolve. They think I won't fight back, I said. Arthur's eyes met mine. They're counting on it. The next morning, I made a call I should have made years ago. My aunt, Renee, Arthur's youngest daughter. She distanced herself from the family business long ago, citing ethical differences. At the time, I thought she was dramatic. Now I understood. Renee arrived that afternoon, sharp-eyed and composed. She barely needed 10 minutes with the documents before shaking her head. This isn't mismanagement, she said. It's deliberate siphoning. What does that mean? I asked. It means fraud. And worse, if they're moving assets offshore, it means they're preparing an exit. The word hit me like ice water. They're planning to disappear? Possibly, she said. Or at least protect themselves before the truth surfaces. I thought of the beach photos. The smiles. The ease. They weren't celebrating family. They were celebrating that they thought they'd won. Renee leaned forward. If you want to stop this, you can't stay quiet anymore. I nodded slowly. For the first time in my life, the fear of being disliked felt smaller than the fear of letting them win. I picked up my phone. Opened social media. Scrolled to Alara's latest post, her standing on the deck of a yacht, hair blowing in the wind, captioned, "Grateful for everything." My fingers hovered over the screen. They built their lives on appearances, I said quietly. Let's see how they handle the truth. Arthur and Renee watched silently as I began to type. And before I could second-guess myself, I hit post. The reaction was immediate. My phone vibrated so violently on the table that it startled me. Notifications stacked faster than I could read them. Comments, messages, tags, reposts. People I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly paying attention. Is this true? What do you mean stolen? I always wondered how Alara afforded all that. I didn't refresh the page. I didn't need to. The truth had slipped out of my hands and into the open, and it was moving on its own now. The first call came from Alara. Her name flashed across the screen like a warning sign. I let it ring. Then another call. And another. When I finally answered, her voice was sharp, frantic, stripped of the confidence she wore so easily online. What did you do? She hissed. Are you out of your mind? I stayed calm. Calm was power. I told the truth. You had no right, she snapped. You're humiliating Mom and Dad. I almost laughed. They humiliated themselves when they lied about Arthur being injured. There was a pause. Then quieter. Take it down, Mila. Please. We can talk. Talk. That word used to hold hope for me. Now it sounded like delay. There was never a conversation when you were spending my inheritance, I said. Why start now? She hung up. 5 minutes later, my mother called. Her voice was cold, controlled, the way she used to speak when she wanted authority without emotion. You've made a very serious mistake, she said. This doesn't stay online. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the sunlight filtering through Arthur's living room windows. You faked an emergency to manipulate me. You took money that wasn't yours. This stays exactly where it is. You don't understand how things work, she replied. Alara needed that support. And I didn't? I asked. Silence. That silence told me everything I'd spent my life trying not to hear. By evening, the fallout spread beyond family. Business partners began calling Arthur. Longtime associates asked pointed questions. Employees, current and former, started commenting publicly, sharing stories of unpaid bonuses and sudden contract changes. Renee worked beside me like a strategist in a war room. Emails. Legal drafts. Screenshots archived and time-stamped. They're scrambling, she said. Which means we move fast. That night, Arthur brought out one final document. I hoped I'd never need this, he said, his voice steady but heavy. But you should see it. It was the original agreement, the one granting my father operational control of the company. Buried deep in the language was a clause so specific it almost felt intentional. In cases of proven dishonesty, financial misconduct, or breach of fiduciary duty, all control is immediately revocable. Renee smiled for the first time. This changes everything. The next morning, I walked into the company's downtown headquarters with my head high. 4 years, I'd passed that building like it wasn't mine to enter. Today, I walked through the doors like someone who finally understood her place. My parents were already there. They stood in my father's office, papers spread across the desk, voices sharp and hurried. When they saw me, everything stopped. You don't belong here, my father said instantly. I placed the document on his desk. Actually, I do. He picked it up, scanning it quickly. His face shifted, not anger, but something closer to fear. This is out of context, he said. You're overreacting. Overreacting is lying about a medical emergency, I replied calmly. This is accountability. Elara burst in moments later, eyes red, jaw tight. You're destroying our family. I met her gaze. No. I'm exposing what you were willing to destroy me for. The door opened again. 2 investigators stepped inside, accompanied by Renee and Arthur. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. The lead investigator spoke clearly, professionally. We're here regarding financial discrepancies and asset transfers associated with this company. Everything unraveled quickly after that. Files were seized. Accounts frozen. Questions asked that couldn't be dodged. My parents looked smaller by the minute, cornered by the truth they'd assumed would stay buried. As they were escorted out, my father turned back toward me, rage burning in his eyes. You think you've won, he said. You'll regret this. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I didn't do this to win, I said. I did it to stop losing myself. When the office finally emptied, I stood alone in the space that had once felt forbidden. Arthur placed a hand on my shoulder. I'm proud of you. For the first time, I believed him, not because I needed approval, but because I'd earned it. The weeks that followed felt unreal, like I had stepped out of one life and into another without warning. Court dates replaced family dinners. Legal briefs replaced holiday texts. The company I had grown up hearing about, but never invited into, became my reality overnight. Renee moved fast. She always did. With the investigators' findings and Arthur's original agreement, the case against my parents was airtight. Years of quiet manipulation unraveled in days once someone finally looked closely enough. The judge didn't hesitate. Control of the company was stripped from my father. The attempted transfer of ownership to Elara was ruled invalid. Assets tied to the misused trust were frozen, and criminal proceedings began for financial fraud. I watched it all from a distance, emotionally detached in a way I'd never been before. Elara tried to reach me after the ruling. First by text, then by voicemail. She said things like, "We were raised this way," and "You didn't have to go this far." She never said I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Some wounds don't heal through conversation. They heal through distance. Arthur fought to recover what remained of the trust, but much of it was gone, absorbed into properties and expenses that could never be undone. Still, what was left mattered less than what replaced it. The company. The truth. The control. Standing in the executive office for the first time as its rightful owner felt surreal. The same walls that once echoed with decisions made without me now waited for my voice. The employees were cautious at first. Years of fear and favoritism had taught them not to trust promises. So I didn't make speeches. I made changes. Back pay was issued. Contracts were honored. Transparent accounting systems replaced the shadows my parents had relied on. I introduced ethics oversight and employee feedback channels that couldn't be buried. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted. People stood straighter. Meetings felt honest. The company began to feel like something that could finally be proud of itself. One evening, after a long day, Arthur and I sat on the rooftop of the flagship property, watching the city lights come alive beneath us. "You know," he said quietly, "they tried to erase you." I smiled faintly. They failed. He nodded. They always underestimate the ones who learn to survive without help. That night, I reflected on the years I spent believing my worth depended on being chosen. It never did. Being overlooked taught me resilience. Being excluded taught me independence. Being betrayed taught me clarity. I wasn't strong despite what they did to me. I was strong because of it. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been told to stay quiet for the sake of peace, if you've ever watched someone else live the life you were denied, remember this. Silence protects the powerful. Truth empowers the patient. And reclaiming your life doesn't make you cruel. It makes you free. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and become part of a community that believes in facing the truth, standing your ground, and taking back what was always yours. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Your story might be the next one we share.